Bueno, primero que nada, quiero darles una calurosa bienvenida.
I want to give a warm welcome to everyone who is with us today. It's a special day. We are celebrating the International Day of Rural Women. You all are aware that IICA has a long tradition of emphasizing this day. And in fact, this is one of IICA's greatest celebrations. This year, given the conditions we are facing because of the pandemic, we must continue with this tradition. Therefore, on this occasion, IICA will be presenting the results of a research project it conducted on inequality and the digital gender gap in Latin America and the Caribbean. This was a study that IICA conducted together with the Inter-American Development Bank and the International IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and the University of Oxford. The study found that rural women are the most vulnerable population group in nearly all the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, largely because of this, in terms of this gap. The pandemic has taught us many things, and one of them is that the world needs to be, that in this world, connection and technology are almost as important as sun and rainfall, and perhaps even more so for the people who, in rural areas, and which will make them part of development, giving them access to better education, to production opportunities. In short, rural dwellers using video technology can improve the quality of their lives in order to enter the modern world. This gap is worldwide, and we know that this gap in connectivity, especially between the rural world and the urban world, particularly affects women in rural areas. This is why IICA, along with IFAD and IDB, has taken on the challenge of putting this at the top of the public agenda. As Dr. Otero says, there are no more excuses. This is a subject of social justice more than anything else. So as we begin this event, I would like to share with you a video called Manos de Mujer by one of our Colombian colleagues. Please listen with me.
Mano fuerte va barriendo, pone leña en el fogón. Mano firme cuando escribe una carta de amor. Manos que tejen haciendo nudos, manos que rezan, manos que dan, manos que piden algún futuro para no morir en soledad. Allá, allá, mano vieja que trabaja, baila, sangre algún telar, mano esclava va aprendiendo a bailar su libertad, manos que amasan curtiendo el hambre con lo que la tierra les da. Manos que abrazan a la esperanza de algún hijo que se va allá, allá. Manos de mujeres que han parido la verdad, manos de colores aplaudiendo algún cantar allá. que tiemblan, manos que sudan, manos de tierra, maíz y sal, manos que tocan dejando el alma, manos de sangre, viento y mar allá. Allá. Yo soy Marta Gómez y canto, comparto y dedico.
I'm Marta Gomez. I sing and share this song called Hands of Women, which is dedicated to rural women, our women out in the fields of Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, on your day, the International Day of Rural Women, I open my arms to you and my gratitude to the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. Again, this song is called Hands of Women. It's heartfelt. And this is for the women who deserve justice and dignity. Very good. Thank you. It's a beautiful song. It's by Marta Gomez, a Colombian musician, and it was prepared particularly for IICA for this event in recognition of the International Day of Rural Women. I would remind you that this broadcast is being followed in the three Americas and the Caribbean, and also Esteban Braiza in Brazil. I would now like to invite Dr. Manuel Otero to share his words of welcome and an explanation of the importance of rural women. Go ahead, Manuel. Thank you, Patricia. Good morning, everyone. It fills me with energy and excitement to be listening to this beautiful song that was just given to us as a gift by Marta Gomez. So I vigorously greet Minister Winder Weir of Barbados, the Minister Teresa Cristina of Brazil, also the team from the University of Oxford University, also the representatives of the IDB, Marcela Pagori, Marcelo Cabriol and Rosana Polasti from IFAD, colleagues from IICA. For IICA, the International Day of Rural Women is a day to celebrate a condition, that of rural women, that holds direct implications and deep roots for us in every sense as an institution. This is because women living in rural territories, and these women deserve and need to be applauded, recognized, because they are at the core of family and productive life. They are the ones who guarantee rootedness, who take the children to school, who are and lead the primary nucleus of our societies. They are also key for food security. And no matter how you look at it, the ultimate purpose of agricultural development and rural well-being, and thus contribute to the welfare of urban society, and to who today is threatened by the destructive impact of this pandemic. Above all, as if that weren't enough, women are the ones who are the guardians of our rural territories and their biodiversity. What else can we say? What else could we say about our women who are in the Bolivian highlands, or in the northern part of Argentina, the Brazilian Nordeste, and even in the rural territories of Central America, the Caribbean? And these are only a few examples. Today's celebration is taking place in the framework of our ongoing relentless work to gain recognition for the vital role, and we want to insist on this. And we want to encourage public discussion, which is so necessary in order to push for the development and implementation of high quality policies that once and for all would improve the situation of the women who live out in the countryside. In 2018, we had barely taken on, I had just recently taken on my position as Director General when we published an outlook on the situation of rural women in the world. And it was a book about women who struggle, women who fight. We raised the hand and the voice to speak about the invisibility of these women. It's not enough to talk about access to land ownership, to productive resources, financing, good, safe drinking water, education, training, health, justice. And in particular, on that occasion, we focused on the problem of connectivity. The pandemic has shown us that a cell phone in the hand opens up almost every type of possibility, the ability to study, to sell, to buy, and therefore to work, to talk, and even to chat with friends or family members, even though unfortunately we cannot put our arms around them at this time. We would insist over and over again on the importance of this point, connectivity. And we are delighted to be able to do this together with such prestigious and powerful partners as the IDB, IFAD, and the team of prestigious researchers from Oxford University with whom we share this conviction and this desire to contribute with a resource of knowledge, the document that we are introducing today in order to draw everyone's attention to the need for building bridges among all the inhabitants of our rural territories in the Americas, and especially women, who are and should always be at the top, one of the top priorities on the agenda, on our agenda, and of public interest. We're promoting connectivity because it's been shown, and this study reiterates it, that over and over again, it's enough to have a cell telephone, a cell phone, to move and to move toward digitization, because this is an indispensable high priority condition for promoting the development of overall productive social and community life in rural areas. Technological transformation and its application in rural areas, with the resulting economic benefits that it brings, make it essential for us to encourage, and do so immediately, policies and initiatives that will narrow that gap of rural connectivity. In the countryside, technological change helps boost levels of productivity, and not only in the Cerrado of Brazil, in the Pampas of Argentina or Uruguay, it also does so in the most vulnerable and struggling regions of our hemisphere. Connectivity that contributes to transparency of prices in the production chain. It facilitates inclusion of women and young people in production processes, to building deeper roots, to breaking that vicious cycle that today creates insecurity, poverty, and culminates with migration and rural flight. Thanks to the support of our dear friend, the Minister Teresa Cristina of Brazil, our friend Minister Indar Weir of Barbados, IDB, IFAD, and the Oxford team, thank you that we can all be together in this initiative, which goes alongside other initiatives in favor of connectivity and digitization, which are already a significant part of the IICA's supply of technical cooperation. For example, the plan for digital extension that is being implemented in Brazil and other countries of the Americas, together with PAD, the organization co-founded by Michael Kramer, who the economics Nobel laureate of 2019, to position the agricultural sector as the strategic focus for leading into post-pandemic recovery. We need to focus on these strategies for disseminating technology, expanding communication infrastructure, and facilitating mass access to cellular telephone services. Investing in improvements of connectivity for rural populations will have a socioeconomic return that is greater and greater as time goes by. This infrastructure is the basis of the incipient digital agricultural revolution that will provide access to information in real time for better decision making based on good practices. Mass use of technology has a practical perspective. It focuses on solving real life problems out in the field at very low cost. Therefore, it is a feasible strategy. It's an effective strategy for improving living conditions in rural territories. Again, thank you so much to our partners and friends in these initiatives, which, as I said before, are the PAD, Oxford University, the IDB, IFAD, and of course, Microsoft, with whom we have worked on a number of projects, focusing always on providing our rural territories with more and better connectivity in order to move toward a more productive, resilient, and sustainable agriculture. Today is the International Day of Rural Women, and our message to the 70 million rural women in Latin America and the Caribbean is a message of affection, of hard work, and recognition. Thanks to you, thanks to all of them for your sustained efforts. We must continue to work for you to make this world a place and with you in order to make this place, in this world, a place that is warmer and more welcoming, just as are the homes of these women who are the soul of our rural life. Again, thank you to the entire team, including Jorge Wertheim, who led the whole process. As Director General, I want to commend all of you. There is more to come. Our fight is just beginning. Here from IICA, I want to reiterate my commitment, our commitment. We will continue to insist on this until we start to see results in rural areas, and we would hope also in urban centers. We wish you all a very good day, and we thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Manuel, for your words of welcome and for your words of gratitude. Thank you too for organizing this wonderful event and for being part of this day. I now want to invite the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security of Barbados, Honorable Indar Weir, to give us some words of greeting. Please proceed, Mr. Minister.
Well, thank you, Director General, Dr. Alfredo, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure for me to join you in the celebration of the Day of Rural Women, International Day of Rural Women. I am grateful for the opportunity to speak not only on the behalf of Barbados, but literally for the entire Caribbean region. The word rural woman strikes a number of things in my mind. First of all, rural construct within the Caribbean region tends to be slightly different from that within the construct of Latin America. And so therefore, given our size, we treat to rural as perhaps the entire country in most instances, because this is the larger part of the country. But within the region itself, you will find that because many of the islands within the Caribbean region are so small, that you would have similarities right across the entire region. This therefore lends itself to a fairly heterogeneous sort of construct that we should always be mindful of. And therefore, I salute the IICA for celebrating the International Day of Rural Women. And I give full support to the theme, which is connectivity, given the fact that after COVID, we are in a position where we can perhaps look at where we are, determine where we need to get to and how we're going to get there. I wish to, however, present a couple of challenges that we may want to challenge ourselves with in order to determine the most suitable fit for going forward. Ideally, connectivity starts with how well we communicate. And I do believe that with the changes that are taking place within agriculture, technology is going to be one of the main drivers in going forward. I therefore believe that more emphasis should be given to women in terms of training, access to funding, and equally given the opportunities that they can continue to be good mothers, whilst at the same time being involved in business through empowerment and enfranchisement opportunities. I therefore believe that access to support, access to training, access to funding, access to technology needs to be far more simplified and removed from the academic construct that it currently exists with. We need to bring a very simplified process in order that all women can be empowered and enfranchised without having to go through the vagaries of academic exercises that may often, and more often than not, challenge them into being able to participate. So therefore, in celebrating, let us be mindful of the role that women can play, but let us be equally mindful of the many women who will lack opportunities if we are not as simple as we possibly can be. And I would draw reference on what we've done here in Barbados. We created what is called a trust loan, which gives people an opportunity to develop a credit history. So therefore, the process is very, very simple. You get access to funding for whatever project you want to do, and no questions asked. The responsibility now is yours to determine how you're going to treat to it and take responsibility for paying back but at the same time, develop a credit history that can transition you to another level. And this, ladies and gentlemen, I believe is a perfect platform from which we can determine how we speak truthfully to the role of rural women and how we may develop a construct that is suitable or maybe a suitable fit for where we want to get to in the future. I am obliged to you and I thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We will now, we're all connected here. We're here from all over the region. So we also have with us the Minister of Agriculture of Brazil, Teresa Cristina. She will be speaking to us from Brazil. Please proceed, Madam Minister. I would like to thank the Director General of IICA, Manuel Otero, for giving us the opportunity to share in this activity today as we talk about food security for these communities and development in every area. A time such as this is essential to draw attention to the growing challenges of women who produce in rural areas. Digitization is one of these challenges, and it has been moving very quickly because of the pandemic. We also have the disadvantageous position of women who are not connected to communication technologies. There is a direct relationship between technological isolation and precariousness of labor, especially involving women who live and work in rural areas. They are the most vulnerable. In Brazil, the availability of cell phones brought about more development and connection, and this was very important for overcoming technological isolation in rural areas. We work in partnership with IICA to take methodologies, new methodologies to these producers with the use of cellular technology. It has become an essential tool for bringing about digital inclusion. We also work with IICA for technical assistance programs and rural assistance programs. We had a project just last week in this regard. We also launched the Agro 4.0 project, which will take thousands of reales out for disseminating technology. Agribusiness is one of the most important drivers of development in Brazil, where we have broken all export records. The agri-food sector has become very important during the pandemic, and it will not fall behind. We work tirelessly to include women more and more as farmers and as family farmers in practices of the future. Thank you, IFAD. Thank you, IDB and IICA. Thank you, Oxford University, for being our partners in this project. And I wish a good day to all of the rural women of the Americas. Thank you, Minister Teresa Cristina. In an event of this kind, when we're talking about rural women, we certainly need to have rural women taking part. And we will now hear from Elvia Monzon. She is a head of household. She's the producer of coffee, avocado, and honey, and she is a leader of the international the Integrated Cooperative of Small-Scale Producers in Rancho Viejo de Guatemala. She has worked with IICA cooperation projects, especially involving coffee rust disease. She is with us today, and we are very grateful to her. She lives out all the words we say about rural women in our countries. And in only a few words, we know that she can express the hard work, the sacrifice, her dedication to her farm, to her family, and to her community. Despite everything that might happen, rural women all over the world, and especially in our countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, women are the ones who experience the worst inequality, even more than the inequality experienced by women in urban centers. Elvia, is going to give us her testimony in the form of a video. And I would ask that, and that she's going to share with us. Thank you. My name is Elvia Maria Monzón del Valle. I am from the village of Rancho Viejo. I am a homemaker, and I also grow coffee. I love coffee. It's my work, and there are other things. Besides coffee, I also like to diversify the crops on my land, and I like growing. I like to grow and develop. They started to put together a group of women in the village. The first thing they did was to ask me to be the chair of the group. So that's where the criticism started, because women can stay in the kitchen and wash the clothes and take care of their husbands. Women can run the household. That's what they need to do. Those are all the rights they need to have. That's all they have to do, take care of their children. So the idea came up that we didn't need to settle for that. We could be more active. But before that, when the changes came, we had a legal representative for 2 years, and we started to discover that the women didn't want to be limited to that. So the women suggested my name, and in the end, they all agreed. So I was the second woman to chair the IDEC Association. That's the Integrated Association of small-scale producers in Rancho Viejo. So once I started serving as the chairman, once again, they chose. So after my term ended, they chose me again as the legal representative and president of the cooperative. But as a woman, I also went through some very difficult times. Because when I started, I remember that I was attacked by a lot of women. I was heavily criticized by the other women. But thank God, I kept going. I got past it, and now I can say that it was all worthwhile. I learned a lot, even from the ones that made my life so difficult, and I am thankful to the institutions that supported me and trained me. I am very pleased with everything I learned. But now that I've been trained, I can say maybe I don't know everything, but I'm able to develop my message with my own words. I can express myself. I didn't have the opportunity to go to school, but I always fought to give my children what I never had. And so I can say, if they don't value it, there's nothing I can do, because I worked very hard. I did this for them. Thank you for this testimony, Elvia. It's moving to see how, through your testimony, we see the history of all the women in our region. Now, I want you to hear from Marcelo Cabrol, who is the manager of the social area of the Inter-American Development Bank. Go ahead, Marcelo. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Jorge, for inviting us to be here. I would like to commend IICA and all of your partners for this work. I want to start with some personal thoughts. To me, this subject has a very profound meaning. I've been working in the bank for 25 years. And I have to say that of all the projects we've carried out, all the programs we've done, the ones I'm proudest of are the ones that we have done with conditioned subsidies, qualified subsidies that focused on women. The area, when we've been most successful, it's been when we partnered with rural women. Those are the most successful programs we've had. Thanks to this work, we have been able to ensure that women handling our subsidies were able to bring greater food security to their families and better diets for their families, but also better solutions in terms of healthcare and education for their children. Developing human capacity in this partnership has been unmatched in anything else the bank has ever done. I don't want to exaggerate that. I don't think this is exaggerating. I believe it's true. This work has many other tangential issues that I could describe. I could talk for a long time, but the point is this. Sometimes you get tired of hearing the same old excuses that Latin America and the Caribbean are urban regions, and therefore that's where our work should be. That's where our subsidies should be. I'm not saying we need that urban versus rural needs to be a conflict. What I'm saying is that we need to rethink. We need to refocus the agenda, focus on rural areas, rural development, so productive development in agriculture, in ranching, and all the people we have out there. At this point in the bank, we are working with a new president. The new president has set out a number of priorities. 3 of these priorities are consistent with the work that IICA is already doing with all of its partners. The first one is job generation, employment generation. This is extremely important. Creating employment, especially for women, is, of course, one of the most challenging tasks before us. We know that 35 million jobs have been lost in the region, and 70% of those jobs were held by women. And the second priority on the table is the rural issue, how to bring about comprehensive rural development, integrated rural development. And the third one is how to use technology and connectivity to bring this about. Women will be at the center of this discussion, and they will be at the center because I believe that if we empower women, if we give them digital capacity, if we help them solve problems using digital technologies, then we will be working for the future. This is the future agenda. And let me focus a bit more on the definition of digital. Sometimes we find ourselves talking just about connectivity and infrastructure, and unquestionably, connectivity and infrastructure are very important. And rural areas are at a disadvantage in that area, but there's more. Once we talk about these two, the foundations of the discussion, then above that, over and above that, there are 2 points we must always remember. First of all, platforms, especially for women to gain access to this connectivity and this infrastructure. And number 2, very important, training, empowering, especially women, so they can use this connectivity in these platforms. Without these 3 factors, we can never talk about digital empowering of women, especially in rural areas. I will close with this. Another example, as I begin, an example of Mesoamerica, salud, health. 10 years ago, we undertook a very difficult agenda, which was to improve neonatal indicators and maternal child indicators in Mesoamerica, with a particular focus on rural areas and areas that by definition were very poor. 10 years down the road, using an approach that brings in partners, which is results focused and works hand in hand with institutions in each country. So as a result, Honduras and Salvador today have rural women that have the same degree of childbirth care in rural hospitals and health centers as people in urban areas, and maternal child rates have improved as a result. This is the kind of thing we need to think about in the future, using digital technologies, using other technologies, and thinking above all about who we can partner with. IICA is one of our favorite partners, I have to say so. It's no embarrassment to say this, and because we're always thinking about results, and I think governments and society need to be accountable for their work. And in the third place, and very importantly, work with all the institutions in the region, especially the ones that work in rural areas and that have taken on the challenge of multi-sectoral action and the need for multi-sectoral policies out in the countryside and make them work. This is all I wanted to share with you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We will continue to work on this agenda. Thank you. Thank you, Marcelo. And now we wanted to close this panel, this introductory panel, with Rosana Polastri. She is the Director for Latin America and the Caribbean at IFAD. And I understand she's with us from Rome. Thank you, Rosana, for being with us. Please proceed. Good morning and good afternoon, because I think we have some people on this side of the world as well on this special day. I will start by breaking protocol and in addition to what we're talking about today, I want to send special greetings to Teresa Cristina, Minister of Agriculture of Brazil, Evia Monzon, the leader of the Cooperative of Small-Scale Producers in Rancho Viejo, Guatemala, Valentina Rotonda, who sent the video, which was launched today, the study rather, the research project launched today, and to all the rural women and everyone else who is with us today in Facebook and YouTube. And of course, I would also like to greet the Minister of Agriculture of Barbados, Inder Weir, and Manuel Otero, Director General of IICA, and Marcelo Cabrol, Manager of the Social Area for the IDB. All colleagues in international organizations, and both men and women that are with us today. It's a pleasure for me to be here today to celebrate with you the International Day of Rural Women, especially because we're talking about the digital gap, the gender gap. For me, that's the most important part of it's much more important than people think. Today, we are launching a study on the digital rural gender gap in Latin America and the Caribbean. We are no longer seeing women as a segment of, as a helpless segment of society. In Latin America and the Caribbean have led this change of perspective. Investing in women is a smart investment, and it benefits all of society. Greater gender equality improves economic production. It brings a greater impact on national development. It has an impact across generations, and it also leads to more representative policies. Rural women in Latin America are the foundation of our societies. They make up more than 40% of the labor force in agriculture in the developing world. A development where up to 80% of the food consumed comes from family farms. So much of the food that keeps all of us alive and that keeps our elders alive and that makes our children grow is provided by rural women. They are the centerpiece of our lives, but they do not always receive the support or recognition they deserve. There are still serious gaps that need to be narrowed. Today, we recognize rural women, but we also emphasize the lack of support, recognition, or of the contributions of women, and this is a big mistake. Societies cannot afford to stop paying attention to rural women. The people responsible for our policies in Latin America and the Caribbean, together with civil society, international organizations, need to design public policies that will make it possible not only to help rural women, but also to give them the tools they need to develop all of their amazing potential. This is for their benefit, yes, but not only that, it is a benefit for all society. In this setting, the introduction of the research project, which is being released today, is especially timely. The future of the economy is digital. That's how we're communicating with each other today. And that's the only reason why you're able to hold this event today. This is true for global enterprises and urban enterprises, but it will be equally important for family farmers. Information technologies, communication technologies, and even including simple uses on cell phones can and must provide rural women not only with access to information, especially on all aspects of life, but also to markets so that they can have direct contact with their consumers. In IFAD, we understand that we need to provide family farmers with connectivity in order to provide them with access to market information. The context of the pandemic in Brazil, for example, our projects were immediately launched a system for long-distance technical assistance using cell phones. Connectivity for the beneficiaries of IFAD projects in the digital world will be one of the top priorities for our future projects in order to foster economic recovery among family farmers after COVID. The opportunities that rural women can have access to if they are connected are countless, and those of us who are launching this study did so because we want to contribute to getting these women onto the train of the future. Our societies can no longer afford to leave women behind. Happy International Day of Rural Women. Thank you very much, Rosana, for being with us today and for your words. Now it's time to introduce the study that was conducted by Oxford University Digital Rural Gender Divide in Latin America and the Caribbean, which was conducted by Oxford University with the support of IICA, IDB, and IFAD. First, I want to show you the cover of the document in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Now I would like to invite Valentina Rotondi from Oxford University. She led the study, and I would like her to join us now and to introduce the document. Dr. Rotondi?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for this amazing invitation. We are so happy to join you in celebrating this International Day of Rural Women. And I'm glad to present today this research we have conducted together with some colleagues from McGill University, and in particular with Luca Maria Pesando, who's connected today and will help us in presenting this research. Professor Francesco Billari from Bocconi University, and Ridike Shah from Oxford University too. So thank you so much to all our partners in this fantastic adventure. It is an adventure that is just starting, so we will be working together on these themes for the next years. And so I wish to thank so much these panelists that just presented the research, and then IICA, IDB, and IFAD. I'm now going to share the screen. As any academic and researcher, we are sharing with you some slides. So please try to forgive us for this. So first of all, as I already said, this is a team of researchers, including researchers from McGill University and Bocconi University. And we started working together on these aspects related to the gender divide and to the digitalization, the impacts of digitalization, thanks specifically to an ERC project that was led by Professor Francesco Billari. And so we are working on this theme since a few years now. What we are going to present today is this particular study. I will briefly present the motivation, and then Luca will take over and present the results of our research involving so focusing in particular on the first level digital divide, that is the divide in accessing the technology, and particularly related to the gender divide and the difference between women and men living in urban and rural areas. And we will do this presenting some descriptive analysis using already existing data, so Gallup data, and some digital traces left online by Facebook users. I will then take the floor once more to conclude. So briefly on the motivation. Our world has faced a big revolution in the last few years, and this revolution is the digital revolution. Parts of the world that were previously disconnected then suddenly enter the connectivity era by, in particular, using mobile phones. So mobile phones have really disrupted our lives and changed our lives, and this happened all over the world, from Africa to Europe. And the Sustainable Development Goals are particularly important because at least in 5 out of 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the word digital comes in. And comes in because much of those Sustainable Development Goals are related to digitalization, and are not only related to digitalization, but are related to gender gaps in digitalization. This means that if we, as we have already seen so far, if we leave behind half of the world's population that is composed by women, then we will never reach and we never realize the Sustainable Development Goals. And if we, at the same time, if we, in a sense, put mobile phones in the hands of women, then we can help the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is what we have shown in a paper that has been published last year, where we studied how mobile phones can be a vehicle for sustainable development by narrowing gender inequalities, enhancing contraceptive use, reducing maternal and child mortality, and then this is particularly important for the poorest living in rural areas. In this report, we specifically focus on the digital gender gaps in Latin America and the Caribbean region. And we do so by presenting some empirical evidence showing the existing of the first level digital gender divide. So first level digital gender divides means gender divide in accessing the technology. Of course, this is not the only important gender divide, digital gender divide that we might imagine. As it has already been said, there are other sources of gender divides. For instance, the second level gender divide, digital gender divide, that is the divide coming from being able to use the technology. And then the third level digital gender divide, that is the divide coming from exploiting the technology. So taking out of the most out of the technology. We are in this particular report focusing only on the first level digital gender divide, but stay with us because in the future we will go farther with this study and we will present other sources of digital gender divide in the region. We will do so by using two different data sources. The Gallup Word Pool, that is a data set covering several countries in the world, is a repeated cross-section. So our surveys repeated 1 year to another on a different pool of people. And then we are going to also use digital traces data on the gender composition of Facebook users available from the Facebook advertising platform. So we are going to use those two different sources in a complementary way, and we will try to present the descriptive evidence of the situation today of the digital gender divide, the first level digital gender divide in the Latin American and Caribbean region. So now I leave the floor to Dr. Pesando, who is going to present you some results.
Thank you, Vale. Can you close your screen and I will try to share my own screen? Thank you. Okay, can you see my screen? Great. So thank you very much for inviting us. We're very happy to be joining this panel today. I'm joining you from Montreal, Canada, so we are really all over the world. And I will try to guide you through some of the results that we obtain in this preliminary work that we have been conducting across universities and also with the help and collaboration of the institutes. So I will first start by describing results that we obtained through the Gallup data. Again, the Gallup data are very valuable in this sense because they provide information on individual level ownership of mobile phones. So these are individual level data from about 23 Latin American countries. And the big value of this data is that they are conducted at different points in time. So they help us to trace this gender gap in mobile phone ownership over time. And also they give a good representation of Latin American countries, because as I said, they allow us to obtain information on about 23 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean region. So let me start from this simple histogram. What you see here is the share of men and women owning mobile phones across the 23 Latin American countries using Gallup data from the last available year, which is 2017 for most countries, except for Haiti and Puerto Rico, whose estimate dates back to 2006. Okay, so the result here is simple. The red bar pertains to men. So this is the share of men owning mobile phones, and the blue bar pertains to women. So this is the share of women owning mobile phones. As you can see, across, I would say, yeah, most countries, the red bar is taller than the blue bar, which suggests that the share of men owning mobile phones is higher than the share of women owning mobile phones, hinting at the existence of gender gaps in mobile phone ownership. There are indeed some exceptions. For instance, in Argentina and Chile, which is here, we observe that the blue bar is slightly higher than the red bar. This suggests that the share of women owning mobile phones is higher in these countries. And also another interesting finding is that there are some countries in which the share of individuals owning mobile phones is in general pretty low. So Haiti is one example. Again, remember that this data dates back to 2006. So if we had access to more recent data, perhaps these two bars would be higher. But pretty much what we want to convey with this graph is that there's lots of heterogeneity in mobile phone ownership across Latin American countries. Let me move on with two additional graphs. Let's first focus on the graph to the left, and then I will move to the graph to the right, which is a little smaller, but I will try to guide you through these results. What we show in the graph on the left-hand side of the screen is how this variable has changed over time. So we have data from 2006 to 2017 for most countries. So this helps us to trace how mobile phone ownership has changed over time. You can see three different lines in this graph. Specifically, the red line traces mobile phone ownership for men over time. The blue line provides data on mobile phone ownership for women over time. And the gray line is simply the ratio of female to men ownership of mobile phones. Okay, so this line is the ratio of the other two lines that you see below. And this first panel gives us a couple of results. So first of all, let's focus on the early years, 2006. Here, the share of individuals owning mobile phones is about 45%, 0.45 or 0.5. And we can see that in about 10 years, a little more than 10 years, the share of individuals owning mobile phones has nearly doubled, because in 2017, this share is about 80, 85%. Another result that we can observe is that more or less the share of men owning mobile phones and the share of women owning mobile phones closely trace each other, though the red line, which is the one that pertains to men, tends to be higher than the blue line all across the years. And this, again, given that these two lines are reflected in the ratio, which is above here, this ratio tells us something on the female to male ratio in mobile phone ownership. So if this female to male ratio is bigger than 1, this would suggest that the gender gap favors women. If this ratio is lower than 1, which tends to be the case all across the years, this suggests that the ratio favors men. And we can see that this ratio favors men from 2005 to 2017, though there is a narrowing of the gender gap over time. Around 2012, 2013, we observed that this gender gap is almost closed, is very close to 1. Though in the latest years, we also noticed that this ratio tends to decline a little bit. So it seems we're moving towards a gender gap, which is widening again. But we want to be cautious on this finding because we would need much more recent data to get a sense of what's going on in the latest years. So what you can see instead on the graph that is to your right is this same line here. So the female to male ratio in mobile phone ownership for each of the individual countries that we have in our analysis. Again, these lines are small, so I will try to convey just the main findings. There's lots of heterogeneity across Latin America. There are some countries such as, for instance, Argentina and Brazil, which have a ratio that is getting closer to 1. So we're getting closer to equality. There are also some countries such as Chile, which is here, where the ratio tends to be higher than 1, so tends to be in favor of women. And there are also some countries such as El Salvador and Honduras, where this ratio has been declining over time. So where the gender gap is broadening again, favoring men. So gender inequalities are increasing. We might think of it this way. Okay. Once again, what we want to convey here is that there is high heterogeneity across Latin American countries. Then we moved one step ahead, and because we wanted to get a sense of whether there were digital divides by not only digital divides by gender, but also digital divides across rural and urban areas, which is ultimately the focus of today's panel. And so what we did here in these two graphs was to recompute these female to male ratios separately for urban areas and rural areas. Again, these four lines give us the share of men in rural areas owning mobile phones, the share of men in urban areas owning mobile phones, the share of women in urban areas owning mobile phones, and the share of women in rural areas owning mobile phones. These are these four lines here. And these four lines can be further summarized into two different ratios: the female to male ratio in urban areas, which is this gray line here that you can follow here, or the female to male ratio in rural areas, which is the last line, the purple one, which you can follow here. Okay, so again, if we look at these four lines, we notice that between 2006 and 2017, the share of individuals owning mobile phones has almost doubled across all of these areas. So irrespective of rural or urban household location of residence, though the red line is always above all the other three lines, okay? And remember, the red line pertains to men in urban areas. Perhaps this is more easily understood by looking at this graph, which shows the share of men in urban areas owning mobile phones, the share of women in urban areas owning mobile phones, the share of men in rural areas, in urban areas owning mobile phones, and the share of women in rural areas owning mobile phones. So there is a very clear gradient whereby the group that has the highest connectivity, let's say, are men in urban areas, whereas the group that has the lowest connectivity are women in rural areas. Okay, so this was suggestive of a divide not only across gender lines, but also across rural and urban lines. So what we also did next, even though we do not show it here, was to conduct some regression analysis. I'll try to be brief on this, by predicting mobile phone ownership as a function of individual level characteristics such as gender, household location of residence, and individual level socioeconomic status as proxied by education. And what we show, and you can have a look at it in the report, is that even after controlling or purging away the association with these additional controls, women tend to remain disadvantaged in terms of mobile phone ownership. To further get a sense of whether there are interactions between gender and socioeconomic status or household location of residence, we conducted some additional interactions, which suggested that, again, that the least connected group are women in rural areas who have low education. So what our analysis shows is that there is a clear group that tends to be disadvantaged in terms of connectivity. And this is also the group where we should target the most effective public policies. And these, once again, are women in rural areas who have low education. This is much better explained in the report, but we just wanted to hint at this result here. And then we, given that Gallup has very good data at the individual level on mobile phones ownership, but it has somehow poor data on women's outcomes at the individual level, we merged information on women's outcomes from the International Labour Organization. And here our rationale was to get a sense of whether what we call online inequalities, so inequalities in terms of mobile phone ownership, are associated with offline inequalities, by which we mean inequalities in the labor market. So from the ILO, we obtained 3 different measures of inequality in the labor market for women, which you can find on the x-axis. This is the ratio of female to male in vulnerable employment. This is the ratio of female to male labor force participation rate, and this is the ratio of female to male youth unemployment rate. So just to help you read these graphs, the first one and the third one tend to be inverse proxies of women's empowerment. So if this ratio is higher, it means that there are proportionally more women in vulnerable employment. So this is not a desirable outcome. And here the same, if this ratio is higher, it means there are proportionally more women with high unemployment rates. So this is an inverse proxy of women's empowerment. Conversely, these proxies for labor force participation rate, so a higher labor force participation rate for women is, we could think of it as a desirable outcome, okay? And once we correlate these three outcomes with our female to male ratio in mobile phone ownership, we notice that there are very strong correlations with the labor market outcomes. Focusing, for instance, on vulnerable employment, what we see here is that there is a very strong negative correlation between the gender gap in mobile phone ownership and the gender gap in vulnerable employment. Once again, remember, the higher this index, the better this is for women, while the higher this index, the worse this is for women. So this is a strong and expected negative correlation, which we thought could be interesting to corroborate the idea that this mobile phone ownership measure is a powerful one. And similarly here, as I said, this is a positive proxy of women's empowerment. So the correlation is not negative as it was in the first panel, but it's actually positive. It's a little weaker in terms of correlation, 0.27 compared to 0.95, but it's still in the expected direction. The last one is also in the expected direction, but it's just a little lower. So we decided to focus mostly on these first two correlations between online inequalities and offline inequalities. Okay, moving to the second source of data, as Valentina mentioned, the second source of data that we may use is information on Facebook users. So here the rationale for using Facebook data is that in countries where women are underrepresented on Facebook, this may also be a signal that they are less likely to be internet users, or they lack some digital skills that might enable them to access the internet and access information on online services. So we're using this Facebook data as a proxy for women's connectivity. And what we use here, first, we computed what is called the Facebook penetration rate. The value of using this Facebook data is twofold. First of all, using Facebook data is useful in the sense that it gives us a good representation of countries. We here managed to get a coverage of about 35 Latin American and Caribbean countries. And the second one is that we can obtain information on use of Facebook by age group, which is exactly what this slide shows you. So here on the x-axis, we have different age groups, and this is telling us to which extent individuals within each age group are using Facebook. And instead, the y-axis gives us the Facebook penetration rate, which is measured as the fraction of the population in a country who are monthly active Facebook users. The left panel focuses on women ages 13 and above, and the right panel focuses on men 13 and above. So moving to the results that these graphs convey, I would say there are two main results. The first one is that between 2018, which is the darker box plot, and 2020, which is the lighter box plot, Facebook penetration rates have been slightly declining for younger age groups, let's say 15 to 30, while they have been slightly increasing for older age groups, as you can see from these later age groups here, up until age 65. If you look at the last age group, age 65 and above, you can see how the lighter gray box plot is higher than the darker gray box plot. This is suggesting that over time, Facebook penetration rates have been increasing. And the second set of results is that there is, again, lots of heterogeneity across countries. Aruba and Argentina emerge as the countries with the highest Facebook penetration rates. And when it comes to comparing women and men, we observe, just looking at it as a snapshot, that men have slightly higher Facebook penetration rates. The median Facebook penetration rate here, 50%, is 50%, but we also want you to understand better this y-axis because this y-axis exceeds 100%. And this typically reflects the fact that one individual may hold more than one Facebook account. So all of these percentages that are higher than 100% reflect the fact that each individual might hold more than one Facebook account. Okay, so this has to do with Facebook penetration rates across Latin America by age groups. And what we want to present next instead focuses on the main variable that we are interested in here, which is called the Facebook Gender Gap Index. computed for the world as a whole. We here provided a snapshot of the world as a whole because we wanted you to get a sense of how different the Facebook Gender Gap Index is for Latin America as compared to the rest of the world. So here you have a scale that goes from 0.1 to 1.3. Again, if this gender gap index is bigger than 1, this suggests that this is favoring women, while all of these numbers below 1 suggest that these numbers are favoring men. Okay, so look at the stark differences between, for instance, Latin America and the Caribbean region, and Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. In Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, the ratio tends to be lower than 1, actually even lower than 0.7 here, suggesting stronger gender inequalities favoring men. Whereas in Latin America and the Caribbean, but also in the United States and Canada, this ratio tends to be close to 1 or higher than 1. We decided to provide a better snapshot of Latin America and the Caribbean, given that this is the focus of this panel here. And what this what this additional figure shows is that despite the fact that in Latin America and the Caribbean, this gender gap index tends to be higher than in Sub-Saharan Africa and in Southeast Asia, there is also huge heterogeneity within Latin America, as we would expect, and as our Gallup analysis suggested. This heterogeneity suggests, for instance, that in countries such as Brazil, the gender gap index tends to be around 1.1 or 1.2. Whereas in other countries such as Colombia, Peru, Argentina, and Chile, this ratio tends to be around 1 or slightly less than 1, okay? As well as in some of the Caribbean countries. So it is true that Latin America is performing relatively well compared to other regions of the world in terms of the Facebook Gender Gap Index, but there is also huge heterogeneity within Latin America, which is worth exploring. We also speculate, and we're almost sure this is the case, that there are heterogeneities across rural and urban areas, though with this specific data, as of now, we cannot really explore this hypothesis, but this is something that we have on the agenda for the future. So for the future, we will want to get a better sense of subnational inequalities within each countries and also inequalities between rural and urban areas. This histogram simply provides once again the exact value of the Facebook Gender Gap Index for each of the Latin American Caribbean countries included in the analysis made with Facebook data. And as you can see, there's a huge range of, there's huge variability, whereby Haiti is the country where the Facebook Gender Gap Index is lowest, while Jamaica, Guyana, and some of the Caribbean islands have some of the highest Facebook Gender Gap indices. This line shows the Facebook Gender Gap Index equal to 1. So it's easier to get a sense of which countries outperform this threshold of 1 and which countries instead underperform this threshold of 1. I will now give the floor again to Valentina, who will wrap up all of these findings and tell you a little more of what we're going to do next in our subsequent research. Thank you very much once again. And looking forward to questions and discussions and clarifications. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
No, keep sharing, please.
Okay. Wait.
Okay, I can do it. Don't worry. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Luca, for this description of our results. Once more, what we have done is a sort of description of the situation in terms of gender gaps and specifically first level gender gaps in the region, across Latin American and Caribbean countries. We tried to do so by relying on two different data sources. One is an existing one, and the other one is directly obtained through Facebook digital traces. And what we show is that there exists actually a digital gender gap in mobile phone ownership that is gradually narrowing over time, yet there is an apparent stagnation in the improvements that we have seen in the previous years over the last half decade, and this is specifically important for some countries. This is something we had to think about, because there could be economic but also political and social situations that might explain this stagnation, or also apparent reduction in inequality over time, over the last half decade. Well, once more, women living in rural areas are the least connected, and this is something that policymakers should really focusing on. And this is, as Luca was actually explaining before, something on which we should also focus our research in the next years, because we need to get access to better data, and we need to get access to individual level data. And with the support of IICA, IFAD, and IDB, which I wish to thank for this opportunity, we are going to do in the future. Combining existing data sources and online traces give us the opportunity to expand our analysis to several other countries within the region, and also to have a glance of other sources of inequalities that might be related, as I already said, not only to accessing the technology, but also to the ability to exploit the richness of the technology itself, and also the capacity to and the skills required to navigate the opportunities of the technology. Once more, this needs further research. This needs further research because research can be the basis for policy making, and we really believe this collaboration with our institutions are pivotal in this direction. So once more, muchas gracias. Thank you so much. Muito obrigada. And well, we are here for any further question from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the members of the team from Oxford University for introducing the results of this study. We have good news and bad news, don't we? Involving gender gaps in the region. They continue to exist, but in some countries we can see that balance has been achieved. And the most important thing is that there is interest in continuing to study. All of this provides important background information for decision makers in our countries in order to solve these problems, which ultimately will have a positive impact on the quality of lives of many people. Together, also, we have people with us from all over the hemisphere today, many of them on the social media. So we would like to receive your comments or questions. Among our guests, we also have some journalists from the region. I would like to know, for example, Samira Sadeke is responsible for the Interpress service, and is with us from New York. And I would like to know whether you have any questions to ask. Samida,
Hi.
do you have any questions?
Hi, can you hear me?
For the researchers?
Hi,
Turn on
can
your
you
camera,
hear me?
please.
Hello? I'm sorry, I'm unable to. Hi, I'm unable to switch on my camera. Is it all right if I just ask the question here? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please. Go ahead and
Thank
ask
you
your
so
question.
much. Thanks for accommodating that. And thanks a lot for this really insightful talk. I think this is women in rural areas is specifically in the region. It's not something we, at least I haven't seen in a lot of researches. So thanks a lot for that. I have two questions. One, I believe for maybe Valentina might be best to answer, but of course I'd love to hear from whoever can share. One is a big part of addressing the coronavirus pandemic has been the use of digital tools, whether it's for contact tracing or communication or raising awareness. So how has the limited access to technology during this time affected specifically women in rural areas, and of course, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean? And my second question is how the digital gender gap affects women's access to health, whether it's reproductive health or just in general. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samira, for this question.
Valentina, si-
Thank you, Samira. Valentina?
Yeah, should I have to answer?
Sí, por favor, Valentina.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Samira, for this question. If you agree, I will try to start from the second part of the question and then maybe leave the first part to my colleague and professor Francesco Bocconi Francesco Billari from Bocconi, who's an expert in the impact of COVID on inequalities related to digitalization. So starting from the second part, we studied personally with the same team that presented the report today, the impact of digital gender gaps and access to the technology on health and specifically reproductive health and sexual health of women living in particular in sub-Saharan African countries. And what we show is that actually having access to mobile phone can be really a vehicle for improving health of those women and reproductive health in particular. So women living in those remote areas can get access to information with respect to, for instance, their pregnancy or their health. And therefore, through getting access to this information or through, for instance, reducing the travel time to the nearest hospital can improve also the health status of their babies once they are born. So the impact of those kind of technologies, which are really cheap with respect to others, we might imagine, are big enough and could really be a vehicle for sustainable development. So narrowing gender gaps in mobile phone adoption, but also narrowing gender gaps in internet access and internet penetration might be pivotal also in terms of health. But there is also research showing that actually having access to mobile phone can improve financial resilience of women, specifically in rural areas. And this financial resilience is also directly related to improved health outcomes for women, their husbands, and their children too. And also to schooling. And this might be clear now in this pandemic situation whereby schools are being closed almost all over the world, and people having access to mobile phones and internet might be able to continue their education while people having not access to those kind of technologies cannot. And here is where I leave the floor to Francesco.
Thank you, Valentina. I probably will reiterate what you just said. Our findings on the impact of the digital divide tend to regularly see that where there is inequality, where there are situation of challenges, the impact is bigger. So we have all the reasons to think that during the COVID pandemics, all these impacts are magnified. So if there is a digital divide before the COVID pandemic, that becomes even more important during the COVID pandemic. And that's not only for women, but possibly for their children, also for the reasons connected to education. Of course, it's, to be frank, it's too early to really assess what has been the broader impact of the digital divide during the pandemic. But I think this pandemic had one of the small advantages of making even more clear to all of us that we need to monitor the digital divide. We need to give access to internet and mobile phones to the whole world. Thank you.
Muchas gracias al equipo.
Thank you to the entire team. I would like to let you know that Dr. Rosana Palastro has to leave at this point. We thank her for being with us from IFAD, and we hope that you will continue doing such good work. Thank you, Dr. Polastri. Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be with you, and we will be in touch. I know that we will continue to work together. Goodbye. Thank you, and goodbye. Now we will continue with our journalists. With us is Patricia Bali. She teaches technology and gender in the University of Argentina. If you have questions for Dr. Rotondi, please turn on your camera before you speak. Patricia. She seems to have some problem with her connection. We also have Katushka Sotomayor from Brazil. She is the editor of Agromaestre B. Katrushka, do you have any questions for Dr. Rotondi? Please let me know and turn on your camera. Good morning, everyone. Yes. My name is Katrushka Sotomayor. I'm a journalist and the editor of Agromaestre in Brazil. I would like to ask Dr. Valentina, your study emphasizes differences in opportunities between men and women, and that there are no limits to these differences, whether it's in the rural areas or in the city. If we have internet connection, if we have cell phones, we still need to fight to reduce disadvantages in the labor market, social discrimination against women and others. The cause and consequence of inequalities that feed on one another, according to the study. So what do you suggest for the countries to start changing the situation of rural women and promote empowerment, agricultural development, even more urgently now with the pandemic? Thank you, Katrushka. Dr. Rotondi.
Thank you, Katiushka, for this question. So I will cite two slightly related studies we are conducting with some colleagues, in particular from Luca Maria Pesando from McGill, who's here today. In one study, we show that actually women and men having access to mobile phone in sub-Saharan Africa women having access to mobile phone in sub-Saharan Africa tend to be much more willing to sustain equality. And this is specifically true, and this is specifically important for women from low socioeconomic background. So in a sense, mobile phones and in general, internet can be a vehicle also to change culture and not only outcomes. And of course, culture is different. It's difficult to change because it's in a sense much more related to several different aspects. But it can also be the case that actually through having access to the life of others, to see, having the opportunity to know different situations of people living farther away and in different places, can be a vehicle, a sort of lever to change also the perception of gender inequality and to improve gender equality. Of course, as you correctly said, there might be several sources of offline inequality that determine also online inequality, and therefore we might tackle both of these together. I said another study in which actually we show that women having access to mobile phone tend to be willing to report instances of intimate partner violence much more than women who doesn't have access to this technology. And this is important because it tells us that actually this technology can be also a vehicle for consciousness in a sense, and can give the women not only the power, but also the empowerment, the feeling that they can raise their voices. Of course, once more, we should be a little bit cautious in this respect, because making policies out of correlations could be sometimes misleading. So we need further research, and we need further research in order to better understand the mechanisms behind the correlations we find between online and offline inequalities. And going back to your question, if I have to pick one aspect from which we can start is, of course, education. Because exploiting the technology without having the capacity to get to accessing it and to using it is maybe in a sense is maybe a reduction of the potential. So it's maybe a way to reduce the potential of the technology itself. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Valentina. Now I want to recognize Andrea Delfino. She is an editor from the TELAM agency, for communication agency in Argentina. Andrea has turned on her camera, so for Dr. Rotondi or for anyone else on the team, please proceed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be here for the presentation of this study. We talk a lot about connectivity and about cell phone ownership and the rest of it. It seems to me that the subject that lies behind all this and is still unfinished is how to link all these things, and and how affordable do these telephones need to be in order to gain good service and to meet the needs that we are all the needs we're placing on these cell phones. How affordable does the service need to be? I wonder whether your study took this into account.
Thank you so much for this question. So I will try to reply, and then I leave the floor to either Luca or Francesco to complete the answer. So first of all, this research, but also other research we have done together, show that actually is also the basic phones, so the features phones that are quite affordable, might improve the life of people around the world. So not only smartphones, of course, smartphones might have a higher impact with respect to basic cell phones or feature phones, but also having access to simple feature phones, for instance, we show that could be a vehicle through which women can improve their health status and also their decisions, for instance, about fertility. This has been shown, for instance, in the case of Malawi. Of course, there is a big issue that is the one related to the cost of connectivity, and this is a policy issue. As far as I know, the World Bank has declared that actually connectivity should be granted to everyone around the world. And the COVID pandemic situation has, in a sense, exacerbated the need to enlarge connectivity. And enlarging connectivity means granting people not only once more the access to the technology, but also the ability to, for instance, buy Airtel or connection. And this is a big issue that should be further addressed. I leave the floor to either Francesco or Luca if they want to add something.
Okay. Yeah, I will follow up on this question a little bit, and I think the distinction that Valentina made between, let's say, normal cell phones and smartphones is very important because there's plenty of research, at least in development economics or applied social science related to international development, that shows that there are some household appliances, and this is very much the case, for instance, for television and simple cell phones, that households typically own despite the fact that they live below the poverty line. This is a fact that development economists have been trying to explain for many years. But the point that I want to make here is that despite their cost, there are some household appliances that households typically own. And this tends to be the case for simple cell phones, while it is a little less the case for smartphones, whose effectiveness deeply relies on connectivity. So I go back to Valentina's point that here the key issue is to ensure that households have connectivity, not just that they own a simple cell phone. And also I wanted to, I jumped back to the previous question that Vale answered, which was a little more related to the possibilities that these digital technologies enable for women's labor force participation. We haven't really looked at this directly in our work, except for these simple correlations that we showed you before. But there is some work, mostly for high-income societies, that shows that these digital tools might enable women to work to be, might make it more likely for women to work part-time and enable them to participate in the labor force by enabling remote work. So we believe this might be a potential pathway for women to participate more in the labor force by being able to work from home and work remotely. We still plan to address some of these issues in the future, both this one related to women's labor force participation and the one related to the cost of owning a smartphone. But so far, we haven't really focused on these 2 points explicitly in this first preliminary work that we shared with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you to your whole team. This has been very interesting, and especially all of your contributions. Now I want to recognize Beverly Best, Director of External Relations and Institutional Relations for IICA, to give some closing words.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends. I have been tasked to give the closing remarks of this commemorative event, which intuitively is fairly straightforward. However, today I find it somewhat difficult to add much to all the interesting speeches we have heard, the presentation we have been provided with, the dialogue held with our audience, as well as the music video we have seen. I am sure you will agree in saying that our eyes, our ears, and our hearts are full of hope. So without being too cliched, I will keep it simple and focus on expressing IICA's appreciation to all those who made this event possible. On behalf of IICA, I express sincerest thanks to all our partners who collaborated with the Institute in hosting today's event in commemoration of International Day of Rural Women. First, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all the speakers and everyone who have participated in today's event for the insightful and heartful contributions. Special thanks goes out to the Honorable Minister Indawe, Minister of Agriculture and Food Security of Barbados, Honorable Teresa Cristina, Minister of Agriculture of Brazil, for sharing your respective visions and progressive thoughts on the potential for enhancing digital agriculture, as well as for closing the digital gender divide. Your continued support to IICA as it carries out its mandate to improve the lives of our women in rural communities of our member states is greatly appreciated. I also wish to extend IICA's appreciation to the Inter-American Development Bank, today represented by Mr. Marcelo Cabral, and the International Fund for Agricultural Development, represented today by Ms. Rosanna Polastri, both of whom are IICA's long-standing and trusted partners, I must say friends by extension, who continue to journey and celebrate several flagship events like that of today of the Institute. Many thanks to the entire team of researchers for undertaking the study and preparing a seminal report, which is entitled The First Level Digital Gender Divide in Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, we wish to thank Dr. Valentina Rotondi of the University of Oxford, Dr. Luca Pesando of the University of Pennsylvania and McGill University for presenting the key findings and conclusions of the study. I think there was another colleague, Francesco, thanks to you as well. Undoubtedly, the results will add to the body of knowledge and contribute to addressing the digital challenges faced by our rural women in Latin America and the Caribbean region. and to Ms. Elvia Monson, producer and leader of Rancho Viejo, Small Farmers Cooperative in Guatemala. Thanks to you for joining and sharing today with us. We at IICA encourage you to continue reaching for the sky as you stand as a role model among female coffee growers in Guatemala and by extension, Latin America and the Caribbean region. Ladies and gentlemen, while the digital revolution is reaching rural areas in many developing countries, the rural digital divide continues to present considerable challenges, as is evident in the findings of the study. For women, the problem is even more acute, who are faced with the systemic triple divide, that is, digital, rural, and gender. We all know different generations of women who have been denied basic opportunities, and this inequity is especially pronounced in rural areas that have not kept pace with the digital-driven advancement and are increasingly essential to our day-to-day living. The conclusions outlined by the study provide strong guidance for governments, private sector, civil society, advocacy groups, and many others to take meaningful steps forward in the near future. It is up to all of us to recognize the urgency of the moment and to ensure we are not leaving rural women and girls behind as technology propels society forward. Enabling rural women to access technology directly impacts sustainable practices in their lives and livelihoods in the agricultural and food systems sector. Today, to mark International Rural Women's Day, IICA's Director General, Dr. Manuel Otero, unreservedly declares the Institute's call and support for advancing the cause of rural women through the access and use of information communication technology, particularly mobile telephones. We at IICA believe that change is possible, and it is that change that we are committed to fight for. This notion, therefore, reminds us that I should not forget to publicly thank the various media houses, artists, and journalists who have collaborated with IICA to effectively promote today's event. So before I close, I also want to extend my gratitude to all members of the IICA team, some who are here and some who are behind the scene, who have worked tirelessly to make today a success. And last but not at all least, to all our online participants, especially our advocates and members of the rural women community, thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias. Merci beaucoup. Muito obrigado. Happy International Rural Women's Day. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Beverly, for your words. I want to salute IICA, Manuel Otero, especially for this and other initiatives that Manuel has launched from IICA. And as an agricultural journalist, I've seen it. I've seen how hard you're working to improve production conditions and quality of life for rural residents by means of partnerships and cooperation, which is so important today. It's also important to thank all of those who worked to make this event a reality, including the communication units at IICA, the communication from the social area of IDB, the communication office from IFAD, and the IDB. And before we go back to our activities, I want to ask you to stay with us just a few more minutes for something that is very moving. This is the Farmer's Anthem, which will be shown to us by Mr. Dale, who was a great musician in Barbados and working with the Barbados diaspora that worked in the Music Olympics. This song, the presentation is called A Farmer's Anthem, The World of Farmers, produced by Mr. Dale and the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security and also the Minister of Creative Economy, Culture and Sports of Barbados through a campaign a tribute and a campaign promoted by IICA to celebrate producers and the members of the great food chain in Latin America and the Caribbean. Listen carefully, listen with your ears and listen with your hearts as you, I will leave you now with the Farmers' Anthem, A World of Farmers. Please proceed.
Estamos conectándola.
Plant your food. Plant to seed. Watch it grow. Watch it
Grow to feed us tomorrow.
till the soil. Nurture it well. And together we all will excel.
With a little bit of love,
A little bit of hope.
a little bit of care and tenderness.
We can feed a whole nation. Lay the foundation to make tomorrow the best.
We got the earth in our hands.
Yeah.
We can be the difference, yes, we can. If we just stick to the plan. Let Mother Nature's power heal the land.
And we will be stronger, live longer. When we eat what we grow, we will prosper. The sun will shine brighter.
Tomorrow will be better. In a world of farmers. Oh na 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 na. Oh na na na.
Herbs and greens,
With more trees,
with more trees.
air is pure.
Make the pledge that somehow
We let food be a medicine now. With a little bit of love,
a little bit of hope.
a little bit of care and tenderness.
We can feed a whole nation. Lay the foundation to make tomorrow the best.
We got the earth in our hands.
We got it.
We can be the difference, yes, we can. If we just stick to the plan.
If only.
Let Mother Nature's power heal the land.
And we will be stronger, live longer. When we eat what we grow, we will prosper. The sun will shine brighter.
Tomorrow will be better. In a world of
Cultivate your
farmers.
seed and you cultivate your health. Cultivate communities and you cultivate yourself. When cultivation at the root of we culture, man, we ain't gonna worry about too much else. Look how long we trying to tell them that cultivating greens is the way to the nation's wealth.
Earth in our hands.
Up in my head.
We can be the difference, yes, we can. If we just stick to the plan.
If we just stick to the plan.
Mother Nature's power heal the land.
And we will be stronger, live longer. When we eat what we grow, we will prosper. The sun will shine brighter.
Tomorrow will be better. In a world of farmers. Oh na, oh na 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 na. Oh 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 na, oh na.
Yeah, sing it, children.
In a world of farmers.
Increíble.
Wasn't that wonderful? This wraps up our event today. I want to thank all of you for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.